Matt Schaff and Shane Hallam of DraftSharks.com here to recap the early action in NFL free agency. And Shane, before we get into it, those of us closely tracking NFL news got the extra challenge yesterday of, I'm guessing, Canada and Mexico teaming up against Elon and knocking Twitter basically offline for, I don't know, it felt like a couple hours right as the free agency news was starting to flow. How did you work around that Twitter outage yesterday?
It was a scramble of which social media that I haven't used much should I go to. I was opening Threads and opening Blue Sky and like, is anyone giving me anything? I'm ready. It was a mad scramble and neither really worked out very well.
Yeah. I think I actually went into Blue Sky for approximately the second time ever yesterday. I tried to start following news accounts, reporters and stuff. They didn't even have a way to set up the alerts that I've got going. So I was like, I'm going to have to watch it and actually see what the news is. I opened up these, tracker blogs. I hopped on Fantasy Football Reddit, turned on the ESPN app notifications, and then was reminded that the ESPN app notifications play that excessive ESPN sound every time as opposed to just a simple ding. I'm like, why did Jared choose this week to go on his vacation?
You were in the control center there for all the news and just the ESPN ding that you'll hear in your dreams. It probably wasn't worth it.
Every like 5 minutes, my phone's like, dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun. Oh, look, a punter signed. I'm so glad that Adam Schefter hit me with that one. But, we worked it out. No actual complaints. You'll find lots of analysis on the moves to date in the Shark Bites fantasy football news section on DraftSharks.com. We'll keep updating there as more moves happen, including probably more IDP updates than you care to read about. But if you're into that, there are some of those there too. Most of the significant names have found new homes. So Shane, we're going to react to some of those biggest moves so far. It could be re-signings, could be trades. We've had some of those happen. What's your favorite move that has happened in this early portion of the 2025 market?
My favorite's been Davante Adams going to the Rams. I wanted him to go to a spot that fit his talents and where he wasn't the guy. There's some talks of him going back to the Raiders or going even to the Chargers. You saw last year with the Jets. I think Davante Adams worked best with another wide receiver like Garrett Wilson opposite him. The Rams having Puka Nacua there, having Matthew Stafford, probably the best quarterback he's had in the last few seasons after old man Aaron Rodgers and Jimmy Garoppolo and everything in between. I think this is a much better spot for him. He had 5 wide receiver 1 finishes in his last 9 games with the Jets for only 1 with the Raiders during last season. So I think this is a spot. Watching the film on Adams, I think he still has it. I think he's still working at a really high capacity, and he's going to see a lot of single coverages with a quarterback and an offense that wants to sling the ball. I think he could pull himself back up to be a wide receiver 2 at the very least.
Yeah, we were wary of Davante Adams hitting that age 32 season last year, but he stayed productive. I mean, maybe he's not peak Davante Adams, but he's certainly good enough Davante Adams, and good enough Davante Adams is better than a lot of receivers. I think the amount the Rams gave him shows that they believe in him over the next couple of years, and it's a great landing spot. I mean, I was surprised that they re-signed Tutu Atwell for $10 million before that. I think that locks him in as the number 3 wide receiver. At that rate, it says that the Rams don't want to start over with a third receiver right now. It also tells me that Jordan Whittington is not going to be as involved as we might have thought based on the buzz he was starting to build last summer. The combination of the contract for Adams and the contract for Atwell also tells us a bit about how they might use Davante Adams. And it seems like maybe he is kind of a Cooper Kupp replacement, whereas a couple of years ago, Adams was primarily an outside receiver. He played more in the slot last year, and it seems like based on those moves that maybe the Rams view him as more of that shorter range guy as opposed to downfield, don't you think?
I do think so, and I think that's great for fantasy. We've seen when some of these more talented receivers like Jamar Chase gets more slot snaps that ultimately it's to lead to more production. It's a lot easier to get open and to catch passes, and if Davante Adams is going to play from the slot and split that up with Puka, I'm all for it. And he's not a player. If you had told me last year you're going to be high on Davante Adams in a year, you're crazy at age 33. But I think I'm turning around with this situation.
I'm curious to see what his ADP does because he's been in the 20s. He's been a fine value, and I think he's going to remain a fine to good value if he stays in that range. I kind of doubt that he's really going to climb much from there because he does go to a team with an established number one. But like we said, there's target volume available. Cooper Kupp got plenty of targets when he was effective last year. Clearly, the Rams believe Davante Adams right now is an upgrade over current Cooper Kupp, so should be a good spot for volume and fantasy production. I like Justin Fields getting a starting job because every time he's starting for a team, he is worthwhile for fantasy. Shane, I only wish that I had been drafting Justin Fields in early best ball as though he were definitely going to get a starting job instead of, I'm going to get some Justin Fields just in case he does. It was a little bit tough because the semi buzz was that he was expected to start somewhere, but it was never really clear. Most of the rumors had him sticking in Pittsburgh until kind of late news that the Jets were really interested. And then, a year ago, we were like, oh, Justin Fields is done in Chicago. Where's he going to start next year? Probably Atlanta. And then that didn't happen. And he went to Pittsburgh for barely a draft pick, was basically backing up Russell Wilson, even though the injury helped Fields get on the field early. So whenever Fields is playing, he is a worthwhile fantasy starter. And I want to see how high he's going to climb in ADP now that he does have a definite starting job, because I think Justin Fields belongs probably among at least the top 14 quarterbacks in ADP with upside beyond that.
I agree. And I'm not sure he's even going to go that high. I think he's going to be a value where people are going to get scared about the Jets and scared about his passing. But the rushing upside, as we learned, is just such a cheat code. I mean, he had 2 QB1 games for the Steelers who wouldn't let him throw in the middle of the field. They wouldn't even let him do that. And with the money the Jets are paying him, I think the handcuffs are going to be off. The college connections with Garrett Wilson and Jeremy Ruckert on that offense could pay a little bit of dividends or at least have some familiarity. So I'm interested in him. I'm interested to see how this affects Garrett Wilson. I think the fantasy community has been pretty split on if Wilson's dead in the water now, or if it's going to be like DJ Moore was with Justin Fields and have his highest yardage and touchdown total. Could Garrett Wilson kind of emerge from this more positive than we thought? I think there's a lot of fantasy value in that Jets offense potentially, depending where that ADP ends up.
Yeah, I think Wilson's been a nice value so far. I've been taking him a lot in the early third round, even late second round on drafters, which is full PPR. I mean, people are going to be soured on him from drafting him at the end of round one last year and getting let down, but Davante Adams is gone. Justin Fields has shown that even if he's not a terrific passer, he can support wide receiver value. And good pull on Ruckert. I forgot that the former Ohio State tight end is there. So that's going to be interesting to see if he can climb a depth chart that's not going to have Tyler Conklin this year.
Yeah, he might be a nice, end of the draft sleeper here if he does win that job. I think he was someone that Fields always liked to check down to, those third downs, tight third downs. And I think we even saw Aaron Rodgers last year start to trust Ruckert. Maybe it's a really deep dart throw. I'll take on Ruckert here and there.
We love those. And he was a third round pick of the Jets, wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, and he's a talented player. So I'm excited. I'm excited for this Jets offense, which usually means they'll let me down, but that's how the Jets go.
It'll be interesting at the very least. One more sneaky guy that I like, the one signing that I like really, is Elijah Mitchell to the Chiefs. And to me, it's interesting for what it maybe says about Isaiah Pacheco. He's been one of my favorite best ball targets at cost this offseason. And to me, the Chiefs jumping immediately on a veteran backup tells me that they still like Pacheco as their clear lead back. To me, the reason that they get Mitchell this early, like right at the start of free agency, and the reason that he goes ahead and jumps into this situation that early instead of waiting to see what happens with other teams, is the Chiefs saying, we've got our lead guy, but we really need a good number two. Here's an opportunity for you. Look how much Kareem Hunt got to touch the ball last year. Look how much Jerick McKinnon got the ball in the past. We like you. We want you to be insurance. We want you to take some of the load off Pacheco at times. And then, Mitchell saying, well, I spent all of last year hurt. Nice to have this opportunity. And in a spot where the starter was hurt last year, maybe I get extra touches here. It seems like that kind of marriage to me. And I think that could be good for Pacheco's outlook. He's been an extreme value if he does hit September as Kansas City's lead back.
I'm with you. I think it's a good sign. It's early. We still have a draft full of really talented running backs, and you never know who's going to draft one. But this really fills out the room. When we heard that the Chiefs were interested maybe in bringing Kareem Hunt back and maybe liked kind of how things were going last year, I think Mitchell fills that role well, and like you said, probably is even more of a pure backup to Pacheco, allowing him to be the starter. So, and I don't think his ADP, Pacheco's ADP, is going to necessarily rise because of this, and people are gonna automatically, be all in. So I think Pacheco's going to remain a value in these early best ball drafts.
Yeah, and I'll keep gobbling them up. Of course, we don't want to overcommit. We could get to April, and even if the Chiefs are like, we don't need a running back, but maybe they're sitting there in round 4 and they're like, holy crap, we thought this guy was going to go in round 2. He's still there. Let's go ahead and take him, and then we'll figure it out later. That stuff is always possible, but I like the signal here for Pacheco. Next question, Shane, which signing or move has surprised you the most so far?
For me, it was Josh Palmer, the wide receiver from the Chargers, getting signed to the Bills for a 3-year, $36 million contract. And maybe it's just the fantasy football tinted glasses over my eyes, but a guy that's had 3 fantasy wide receiver 1 finishes in his entire 4-year career was not someone that I expected to get this type of money on a team for the Bills that we all think could use an upgrade, at least a little more depth at some of those weapons. I mean, this type of money for Palmer makes him a starter. He's going to be on the field in those 3 receiver sets almost certainly. And there's some good advanced analytics on him in terms of separation. Last year, he was top 10 among wide receivers in the NFL. There's some positive things, but it still just felt like such a ho-hum kind of signing in a weak free agent class for wide receivers. There wasn't anyone out there that was going to break the bank in terms of a pure free agent signing. But Josh Palmer, someone in a lot of drafts that I've done, hasn't even been drafted, certainly will now. And I was surprised that he was such an apple of the eye for the Buffalo Bills.
It's interesting for me to note that he got the same contract that Darius Slayton got with the Giants. So I think that could maybe help frame the expectation for Palmer. It's tough to read what the money means, especially because if we look back at last year's free agent market, Gabe Davis and Darnell Mooney got 13 million a year over 3 years. So similar sized contracts, seemingly similar market. But this year we've got a higher salary cap. So maybe the read here is that these teams are less enthusiastic about Josh Palmer and Darius Slayton than those teams and the market in general were about Gabe Davis and Darnell Mooney last year. I think from a fantasy drafting standpoint, you should be less enthusiastic about Josh Palmer and Darius Slayton than anyone was about either of those players last year because they're both more limited players. And I think they're in somewhat limited situations. That might sound weird for Palmer, but I think that there's really potential for fantasy drafters to overrate his landing spot. The Bills told us heading into last season that they want to just kind of spread targets around to different guys. And it worked out for them. I mean, they made it to the AFC title game last year with this cast of pass catchers that, didn't wow anybody. So I think Palmer's just going to kind of fit into that group. And this was just the going rate for him. I'm with you that it's surprising that this is the going rate for Josh Palmer. Like if you're paying him $12 million a year, why not just go after Marquise Brown from Kansas City? And that makes me wonder if maybe Brown wanted more on a longer term deal. He wound up signing a 1-year, $11 million deal to stick with the Chiefs. So maybe he was asking for more than this and teams weren't willing to commit that much coming off the injury. And so he was like, all right, I'm going to take one more prove it deal with the Chiefs, hope that my shoulder stays healthy this year, and then we'll hit the market again next year and really cash in. And if that's the case, then I guess I get it. But if it was actually choosing Josh Palmer over Marquise Brown, that would surprise me.
Yeah, that would surprise me too. I like what you brought up about Darius Slayton. It's like these guys are number 3s getting this type of money. When you look at the other options out there, for the Bills, would be bringing back Amari Cooper or signing someone like DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, Stephon Diggs isn't coming back to Buffalo, but he's out there. It's not exciting. Exciting players that they could have added as that number 3. But yeah, Josh Palmer's not someone I'm interested in still, even being paired with Josh Allen.
And worth noting that they, in this same offseason, extended Khalil Shakir at a higher annual average than what they just gave Josh Palmer. And I don't think any of it precludes Keon Coleman from stepping up this season. So I think that will probably lower his draft cost, but there's still room if he shows that he's ready to claim a larger role in the offense. I don't think the Josh Palmer addition or Khalil Shakir extension keep Keon Coleman from emerging if he's ready to do so.
Agreed.
The surprising move for me is Aaron Jones. Not that he returned to the Vikings, but the fact that he got $20 million on a 2-year deal at age 30 with the Vikings. Like a year ago, they picked him up immediately off the market after the Packers dumped him. And I'm not sure what has changed versus that time last year, other than the salary cap going up, which of course should be a factor in how much guys are paid. But we just talked about the receiver contracts, and Jones getting a year older and now coming off a career high carry and touch count. So to me, the money says the Vikings loved what they got from Aaron Jones last year, and he's going to remain the clear leader in the backfield. I also can't help but wonder if it's a deal that they're going to regret by the end of this season, just the amount of money that they're throwing into a post 30 running back.
It feels like a lot, like you said, for an older running back who the Vikings front office is pretty savvy in terms of how they have worked in players, let players go. We saw that with Sam Darnold. I thought this would be a savvy move of we'll bring back Aaron Jones if the price is right, but we're willing to give him up and take a lower player, sign a Rico Dowdle or someone to kind of fill that hole if we need to. But I think when you have bringing in basically a rookie, even though he's going to his second year, and JJ McCarthy, a quarterback, I think they feel a lot more comfortable probably with Aaron Jones as a blocker, as a leader on that offense. This is one where I'm with you. They'll probably regret it. It's probably not going to look good kind of long term. And I still think they might invest a little bit more at running back, might draft somebody like we talked about before. All these teams, if the value's right, isn't going to hesitate from that because they'll need someone down the line. I guess it's good for Aaron Jones this year, for our purposes for fantasy, but I'm not exactly expecting the world here.
Yeah, he's a solid value at where he's been going in drafts so far. I wouldn't be surprised if he climbs some now that he has a team. The uncertainty of not having a contract, I'm sure, helped keep his ADP down to this point. But I would bet that the Vikings add something else. I would think that they wouldn't head into this season feeling like Cam Akers is good enough to be the number 2, feeling like Ty Chandler, who fell behind Cam Akers last year, is a good number 2. So I think they'll probably draft somebody. And this remains kind of like a quietly nice spot to take a handcuff running back because of the injury history and age on Aaron Jones. I wonder if they're going to limit his touch count this year versus last year. Again, it was career highs in carries and total touches. So they could take some of that away from him and still have him be a sensible move for what they spent in free agency. Shane, final question. What is one move that you think fantasy drafters are going to overrate?
I think Najee Harris signing with the Chargers was a 1-year deal worth my favorite line of free agency, up to $9.25 million. Like, this is the maximum if all these things happen and Najee Harris is a top 5 NFL running back or something. I think the NFL fit is so good, and that's what I've seen on social media. And I feel this way too. I mean, this is a Harbaugh running back. They're going to use him up, and he's just this hard-nosed interior runner. And like, the fit's fine. Najee Harris has gotten 1,000 yards rushing every year. He's never been a great fantasy running back. I don't think he's going to get a ton of passes for PPR leagues. I think the Chargers, just like we've talked about with the Vikings and these other teams, are probably not done at the running back position. Ultimately, might draft somebody, might sign somebody else. I doubt that they're done. I think Harris is someone, because he was a first-round pick, we just want to be better than he is. I think we know what Najee Harris is, what his production is going to look like, and being on the Chargers, whose pass rate, increased over the back end of the season. I think they're going to trust Herbert a little bit more, and that might mean Najee Harris is just the same old Najee we've been used to.
Yeah, I'm going to be curious to see how this one plays out, because fantasy drafters have fallen out of love with Najee Harris over the past couple of years, in part because we all wanted to see Jaylen Warren get the ball more in Pittsburgh. So I want to see if that, lack of love carries over to the Chargers and people just not wanting to draft Najee Harris too high, in which case he could become a value. I think the Chargers are telling us that they believe Najee Harris is an upgrade over Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins, which I would agree with. He should be better both as a runner and receiver than what they got last year. And I wonder if their lean away from the run and to the pass was trusting the personnel or was distrusting the backfield, especially at a time where Gus Edwards first had an injury and then J.K. Dobbins had an injury. So we've seen the run leaning histories of both Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman. I wonder if they're going to lean a bit further toward the run. I ultimately like the landing spot for Najee Harris in spots where I already have him. Best ball drafting, dynasty leagues, I think it's a good landing spot for that. If he climbs much past, like, I don't know, RB 18 in ADP, he might get into risk range, though.
No, I think it's fair. And for all these players, right, it's all about value. If the value's there, if Harris stays as a low end RB2 in drafts, then Yeah, I'm in. But I think you'll have one or two people in each of these early drafts, especially until the NFL draft happens, feeling like they're going to get a bell cow here and maybe propping them up into that RB 15 range.
And value is the key. I mean, it's one of the main things we talk about. Our ADP market index tool does a really good job of not only tracking where these guys are going in drafts, but also indicating which players we think are overrated, which are underrated, which are just, properly rated with where they're getting drafted. I'm going to be watching how players move there. I especially recommend checking out the best ball ADP pages on Draft Sharks right now, because even if you don't draft best ball, and even if you're not playing half PPR, which is what our best ball ADP is based on, because that's the underdog format, that's where easily the highest volume of drafts are going on right now. People are actually drafting teams. They're putting money into it. They're picking the players they like. So you can get a good read on how the market feels about players, how those player values adjust, and the comparison of those market values versus how we project those players for this year. Of course, our projections are going to be updated. They're being updated as we speak for the moves so far. Shane, I want to see what the market does with Javonte Williams. And I think there's definitely room for drafters to immediately overrate him, because when you look at the Dallas roster at the moment, it's Javonte Williams, it's Deuce Vaughn, and it's probably other running backs that people haven't even heard of. So I think the natural inclination is to say, oh, look, the Cowboys jumped on Javonte Williams. They're not re-signing Rico Dowdle. Javonte Williams is a new Rico Dowdle, and I can get him at a value. I think it's okay right now to treat Javonte Williams as maybe the Dallas starter, but I definitely would not treat him as the likely Dallas starter. John Machota of The Athletic said, quote, they can go into the draft looking to pair Williams with a younger back. That's a good plan. And I agree with that. I think their best path would be having Williams in place, but also planning to draft an upside running back. And, having Williams maybe take some of the pressure off, or maybe we don't have to make that pick too early. We can wait until it fits our overall draft plan. But if they hit September with Javonte Williams as their top running back, it's probably not good news for the Cowboys offense.
No, it probably isn't good news for the Cowboys offense in that case. And I always kind of treat free agency, especially in these 1-year deals, that teams are plugging those holes, but they have their eyes on the draft, right? If that value falls, and you have to have a backup plan. If all the running backs go way too high, like we saw for Dallas last year, right? You had to have the backup plan. They had to have Rico Dowdle there. They didn't have anyone, so they have to have Javonte Williams there. But they're going to keep an eye on that running back position in the draft, because they clearly see it as a need, which it certainly is. So I'm with you. I don't think we go into the season with Javonte Williams as a bell cow running back, that he's certainly going to share carries, and they're certainly going to bring in someone else. I think even if he gets the lion's share of the carries, he's still going to be touchdown dependent. I'm interested to see where that ADP goes, because for some reason, because of Dak Prescott, because of CeeDee Lamb, that Dallas running back position seems to get a lot more eyes on it in the fantasy community and feel like there's big time potential, and we just haven't seen that from Javonte Williams since his injury.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, Rico Dowdle, could still re-sign with Dallas. He hasn't yet, but it could be that they're like, yeah, go ahead and test the market, see what you can get. And then he comes back, he's like, oh, I couldn't really get anything. So if you guys are still interested, I'll play here. We'll see what happens. There's a lot left to play out, even though, like we said, lots of the big names have already come off the market. If you disagree with any of our choices for any of these questions, let us know in the YouTube comments. We will most likely answer them, unless you're, blatantly trying to troll us. But hey, if you catch me on the right day, I might even answer the trolls. You can also visit our Draft Shark subreddit, have longer conversations about all these things, get access to any of us. If you want to test any of our opinions, whether talking dynasty, redraft, best ball, all that stuff, no matter what kind of format you're playing, whether you are best ball drafting right now, whether you're focused on dynasty, or whether you're just kind of collecting info to prep for your 2025 redraft leagues, we've got you covered at draftsharks.com. Our goal is to make sure that DS is your unfair advantage.